A month or two ago, I did a video where I talked about the worst sequels that I've read. Now, finally, I'm doing a follow-up and we're going to talk about the best sequels that I've read. Or, to keep in theme with the other title, worst first books in series. Now, the reason I've put this video off for so long is because I am not the type of reader that continues reading series if I'm not enjoying them. I'm very comfortable with quitting a series if it's not connecting with me, because I have so many books I'm excited to read, and because reading's a hobby, so I want to like it. So this is not going to be a passionate video. It's going to be pretty chill, and the list is going to be pretty small because there just aren't that many series that I'm going to continue if I didn't like the first book. So this video is mostly just going to be books that had a solid beginning, but the series really just gets better. Okay, here we go. Kicking it off with the series that I am currently reading, and that's the Wheel of Time series. The Eye of the World is the first book in the series. I have a review. Link it up high. I am only 4 books into this series, and I have enjoyed all 4 up to this point. I actually really liked book 1 a lot. Book 1 does get some flack because Robert Jordan very distinctly, very obviously, and very openly leaned heavily on the Lord of the Rings trilogy to kick this book off. Probably the first half of the book is very similar to Lord of the Rings, and then starts to part and do its own thing with the end of the book, and then the rest of the series is very much its own. And that's why I say this book should be on the list, is mostly just for the criticism that it gets, because it does branch off and become its own thing. Personally, I actually liked book 1 more than books 2 and 3, even though books 2 and 3 were both great. Book 1 was my favorite of the first 3 books, and then book 4 probably tops book 1, but that said, just for the sake of it leaning so heavily on another book for inspiration and then branching out and becoming its own, I think that it could qualify because it really does become a very unique, complex series, at least as far as I've read, that is wholly and entirely Robert Jordan's, and that a lot of other authors since then have leaned heavily on his books for inspiration, and I don't really think there's anything wrong with that. Next we have The Bear and the Nightingale. So this is one of the few series that I continued on even though I didn't love the first book. I do have a review for this one as well. I'll link it in the corner and in the description. But what I said in my review is that this book is essentially a love letter to Russian folklore. This is a US author who has studied Russian mythology and folklore a lot and loves it and wanted to write about it. This is a very environmental novel. She spends a ton of time building an environment, making you be able to feel the cold that's surrounding you and smell the fire and experience everything with the characters without really building much of a plot. Some people love that sort of thing, some people hate that sort of thing. It tends to be a miss for me. I love a good built-up environment, world, characters, all that good stuff, but I really like plot too, and books that don't really have any emphasis on plot or progression in the story at all tend to be a miss for me. The last 50 pages of this book actually did appeal to me because that was when the plot finally began and the plot sounded really cool, so I did continue on with the next book. The next book was, in my opinion, better, in a ton of people's opinions, worse, so it depends on where you fall. If you loved book 1, you're probably not going to like book 2 as much. If you didn't like book 1, you may like book 2. I read book 2, I did like it better than book 1. I still didn't read book 3 because it's just not the series for me, but I did like the next book better. Six of Crows! Six of Crows. Ha. I actually really appreciate how much you guys don't hate me for not loving this duology as much as everybody else seems to. I actually openly, happily, and frequently compare Six of Crows to The Lies of Locke Lamora because I think that The Lies of Locke Lamora, well, Locke Lamora came out first, so I'll word it this way. I think that Six of Crows is a worse done version of Locke Lamora. And I know that a lot of you guys love Six of Crows, so I super appreciate the amount of not hate that I get in saying that as often as I do. Six of Crows was a weird book for me. I hated the first 2/3 of it, DNF'd that book 5 separate times, but kept picking it up because you guys really wanted me to see it through. I really enjoyed the last part of it, and I thought book 2 was solid. The story was quite engaging the entire way through. The plot was actually there in book 2. Once again, book 1, the plot was only promised throughout the book, kind of like The Bear and the Nightingale. only promised throughout the book until the very end, then you finally got the plot. And I just like balance. I like the plot along with the other things. And Six of Crows did not deliver that until the end, and because of that, I have a really mixed feelings about it. But Crooked Kingdom, I have pretty solid feelings. I thought it was good. Okay, here we go. I think that this will be controversial when I say it, but then when I explain it, not so much. The Lord of the Rings. So, Fellowship of the King is the first book in the trilogy. You also have The Hobbit, which I didn't love. But Fellowship of the Ring is the first book in the trilogy, and I didn't read The Hobbit until I was an adult. So, this is a middle grade book, and I have reviews for all of these as well, but this was very formulaic and repetitive in the way it was written, and it's great for middle grade. It's great for episodes as you read a chapter a night sort of thing. Great for its purpose. Didn't love it personally. And then Fellowship of the Ring is a totally new thing, very different from The Hobbit. I just really struggled with Tolkien's writing style more than anything else. I was still relatively new to fantasy when I picked up the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I know. I always get a comment, it's not a trilogy though, it's one book. Y'all, I know he wrote it as one book, but it was published as 3, so it's not a big enough deal to comment about, okay? So the trilogy, I still love the trilogy. Book 1 was tough for me because it just took me so long to connect with Tolkien's writing style. But by the time I got to the end of book 1, I felt like I was used to it. And book 2 was the best thing ever. And book 3 was the second best thing ever. I really, really, really want to reread this trilogy soon and do a full, book talk dedicated review sort of thing, because now that I'm used to his writing style, now that I've read a lot more classics and a lot more fantasy, I really want to be able to fully enjoy this series like I wasn't able to the first time through. Dipping back into YA, we have the Lunar Chronicles, which is actually a series that I read quite a while ago. I haven't reread them recently, so I guess I don't really know what my feelings about them would be at this point, but I figured they would probably be solid because even though Marissa Meyer doesn't write the kind of books that I tend to read, I just really connect with her writing style, and I tend to like what she writes. Not always, but I tend to. So the Lunar Chronicles is a young adult sci-fi fairy tale retelling series. So the first one is Cinder. It's about Cinderella, follows a cyborg. Anyway, falls in love with the prince, evil stepmother, all that good stuff. The rest of the series does other fairy tales, and it's all interwoven, and the characters build up this really great crew. It's fun. It's just a really enjoyable read as far as what I remember, but I do know that a lot of people read book 1 and then quit because book 1 is a little bit more typical and not quite as unique, minus those little sci-fi elements. And I think the further you get into the series, the more the characters weave together, and the story ends up being really, really cool from what I remember. I loved it. I don't know. I know that if I reread it, I would probably still really enjoy it, but I don't know how much of that is nostalgia because my reading tastes are pretty different now. But I really loved it when I read it. And then I also wrote down Warbreaker. I really don't know if this counts. Warbreaker it's currently written as a standalone, but Sanderson said that he will turn it into a series. Just don't hold your breath, is what he wrote, because it'll be a while. But Warbreaker is also the prequel to the Stormlight Archive, which is phenomenal. And I loved Warbreaker, but Stormlight's so much better. I will also say, even though I love all of Sanderson's books, so do with this what you want, but I will also say that I'm a middle book person for Sanderson, which is interesting because I tend to not be a middle book person anywhere else in life. But with Sanderson, his middle books are always my favorites. And of course I know Stormlight is a 10-book series and there are 3 published, so I get that it's too early to call this the middle book. But as of right now, Words of Radiance is my favorite of the 3 Stormlights, and Well of Ascension is my favorite of the 3 Mistborn. I know Mistborn has spin-offs, or has prequels and sequels and Oh, I guess Tolkien did that for me too with Two Towers, now that I think of it. But that's all. That's just a little discussion about some of the books or series that I enjoy as they go on. Again, this isn't a list that I have really strong feelings about because if I don't like the first book, I don't read the second book. But I am really curious. I know a lot of you guys are the type of readers where if you start a series, you have to see it through to the end, even if you hate it. So I'm really curious what series ended up surprising you, that you ended up liking more even though you didn't like the first book. I'm also curious about the series that I haven't enjoyed and want to quit or have already quit that you think do get better and you think that I would like more moving forward. It's hard for me to pick up a sequel when I didn't like the first book, or pick up a third book when I didn't like the second book. It's very difficult. I'm dealing with that with Lightbringer series right now. I'm having a hard time picking up the third book because I did not like the second book. But let me know what you guys think. Are there series that I really need to step up and actually read even though there was a dud in the mix? And let me know which ones you found in that way. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.